back, everybody, to the newest episode of PenPodcast.com. I'm your host, Matthew Harms, founder of Pen for Hire, where we offer premier ghostwriting and author coaching services. Also, the creators of the Pen Podcast, where we sit with authors, writers, writing industry professionals, subject matter experts, and all around interesting people. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by someone who ticks many of those boxes, and one that we've never had before. So please welcome Lucas Hunt. How are you today, Lucas?
Doing great, Matthew. Thank you very much for having me on the program.
It is my pleasure. Always nice to have another New Yorker on as well.
New York's the place to be, even in summer when it's sweltering and you'd rather be by the sea.
Oh, we might be differing there. I'm going to Mexico next week, and I'm never happier than when I'm in Mexico. But yeah, I love my New York guests because I don't have to slow down my.
No, there's no speed limit when it comes to speech.
And actually, that's kind of an interesting segue right there, because one of the things that you do, I believe, requires pretty rapid
talk
speech.
Fast. That's right. Auctioneers talk fast. We chant, we move it along. You know, sometimes you slow it down. You don't want to dazzle people too much, but yeah, we're trained in fast talking.
So tell me a little bit about, how did you get into auctioneering?
Yeah, so a friend of mine saw me at a poetry reading in the Hamptons, where I went out to study poetry in graduate school. And she thought that I would be great to fill in for an auctioneer for a bra auction for a women's cancer organization in the Hamptons. And you know, she thought my public speaking abilities were great as a poet, and that would translate to fundraising. And so I asked her why she thought that could ever be true, but it turned out that they had an auctioneer who got sick, so I went and filled in for their auctioneer and loved it. Just loved the idea of, you know, fundraising for a cause that could help people, you know, people that were overcoming, in this case, cancer. It was so inspiring. Just like poetry can be inspiring, fundraising, you know, for nonprofits is inspiring. So that was the segue.
So yeah, I mean, I didn't even plan that, but that works out wonderfully. So we're gonna sit here for a minute. How do you even bring yourself to say, yeah, that's something I'll take a shot at?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Iowa in an agricultural community where auctions were commonplace. You know, on the weekends at the American Legion, at the ballpark, in the barns, in the fields. It was just a part of our culture. You know, they call it in the auctioneering world triple D's: death, divorce, or debt. And so, you know, when property exchanges hands in those instances, the auctioneer comes out. So I was around that a lot growing up, and that's where you hear that fast talking, you know, $100 better not two, not two, $100 better not three, that kind of thing. But I moved to the Hamptons for graduate school to study poetry, and then got exposed to the gala world. So kind of going from pigs to pearls in that sense. And that's how kind of the literary life led into the nonprofit world.
Yeah, it's so funny now that you say that. That makes perfect sense. I guess just being from New York, and you seeing all these kind of more high profile auctions, you tend to lose sight of the fact of all the other things that get auctioned off.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely real estate, and around the country, it's even more than in New York. But real estate, personal property, art, antiques, and then private estates. You know, when people pass on. But the type of auctioneering that I ended up specializing in was with nonprofit fundraising. So I'm selling off experience packages at big dinners, and then also just asking people to donate. Sometimes selling nothing, but merely appealing to people for donations.
That, and as a word guy and as a language guy, I've always found the auctioning world interesting, because kind of like you just did that little brief. I'm not even going to attempt to recreate it because I can't, but it almost sounds like you guys are speaking your own language.
What we're doing in the fast talking scenario is chanting, and that is rolling together a series of numbers and a series of filler words. So the number, is like $1, now $2, and then dollar becomes a filler word. Now is a filler word. So $1 now $2, $2 now $3, Well, when you start rolling that together, you're saying things like $1 bidder, now two, now $2 bidder, now three. So dollar bidder becomes a filler. $1, now two, now $1, now three, now $3, now $3 bidder, now four, now four, now $4 bidder. And then you just kind of keep it going so that it becomes this kind of rhythmic, it's meant to be to convey urgency to the bidder, now's the time to give.
Now, at what point, like, I feel like my mouth would get tired. So at what point do you take your breaths and how long can this go on for?
Yeah, well, so at auctioneering school, college in Iowa where I went, you literally wake up in the morning, you practice for half an hour, just warming up, saying tongue twisters. The big brown bug bit a big brown bear. The big brown bug bit a big brown bear. You say that 30 times. Tommy Atatamus took 2 T's, tied them to the top of 2 trees. Say that 30 times. Series of like 10 tongue twisters. Then you do counting drills. You just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 100. And then in reverse, so like 100, 99, 98, 97, all the way down. You do different increments, 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15, all the way up to 100 and down. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So sort of really build up your capacity for not only breathing, but speaking. And then, yeah, I'm not a real auctioneer who does, car auctioneers, cattle auctioneers. They'll go on for hours and hours with that at that clip. Fortunately, mine in the ballroom, it can be much slower. It's more of an artistic style, $100. Well, I don't even say 100. 1,000, now 2. Would you bid 2,000? How many people would bid 2? So it can be whatever the speed, and the higher the increment, the more you slow down, so that people are very clear. So if you're saying $1.1 million, you're not saying 1.1 now, 1.2, 1.3. You're saying 1.1 million. Who will bid 1.2? Yeah.
So I've got a couple questions. I'm going to start with this last one first. Has there ever been an issue, either with maybe not with yourself, but that you've seen where someone wound up bidding on something that they really didn't intend to bid because they didn't understand the number?
Oh yeah, they were drunk is usually the case. And that's where you got to slow it down. And yeah, it happens. There's buyer's remorse. I would say within 10 seconds probably within 5 seconds of maybe even 3 seconds, there's 2 bidders. One is going to be the winner, one is not. The person who doesn't win, probably 3 seconds after not winning, is usually quite relieved they didn't win. People get swept up in the moment. They're wanting to appear whatever, alpha, bitter, generous, dominant, rich, whatever the idea is there, just to be seen as generous. But yeah, there's also the case where people wish they would have bid higher. They stop too soon. There's the bidder's remorse, and then there's the buyer's remorse. The buyer is like, oh shoot, should I have bought it? We'll have a drink. It's too late. You bought it. And then the bidder remorse, like, oh, I could have gone higher, and I'll never have a chance to kind of win that thing again because it was priceless.
So, oh man, hold on, I gotta write this down because there's 2 equally combative thoughts in my heads right now. So the first is, you mentioned usually someone's drunk. So
yeah,
you can't enter into a legal contract when you're drunk. So do you ever run into an instance where someone's like, all right, you're out. You were too inebriated to make this decision? Or is it kind of like, nope, that doesn't apply here. This is charity.
Yeah, we'll take the money. Again, you can't talk too fast, and you can't drink too much, and you can't donate too much money. It all, as long as people give, and generally there's the verbal contract that you're talking about is non-binding. If you say yes, I will pay for this, or yes, I will bid for this, it's non-binding. I can say sold to you for $10,000, but it's not something that is going to stand up. And so because it is nonprofit, it generally happens that the honor system works out and people honor their bids. Hence the need to slow it down and make sure you look at people. Are you in at 10,000? Okay, going once. Anyone else going twice? You're sold. So yeah, you want to work with consent carefully in the ballrooms.
Got it. The second thought I had to that point is when you said bidder's remorse.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen an instance where the bidder was so upset that they didn't get it that they tried to then buy it from the person who won?
Not directly, but I have had cases where people will come up afterwards and say, do you have another one? Was there perhaps a second one? Or can you go get a second one for me? That's the more common scenario, where they sit for a minute and they're like, I really wanted that. Perhaps they have a second one. And sometimes I do.
Right. I would imagine in the case of like an autographed Babe Ruth rookie card, you probably don't have a second one sitting in the back room. But in the case
Yeah.
of something that was donated by a corporate sponsor, where you can easily go back.
Yeah.
Can you give us another one? We
There's
might pay you something for this one.
Yeah, if there's a suite to a Billy Joel, concert, there might be in a second suite. There might be a second concert. So, or if it's a trip, weekend in the Hamptons or golfing, tickets to the Masters, it's like we can probably come up with it, for the right price.
Got it. Yeah, no, and whatever that guy got it for is not going to be what you're getting it for, because now we've got to put in some extra work here.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna pay.
Yeah, that's a New York mentality right there. It's like, well, you lost out the first time, so what's it worth to you this time?
Yeah, you got it.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump back to the original question I had before we went down this rabbit hole, because you mentioned poetry for your master's in the Hamptons, but then you went back to auctioneering school in Idaho. So
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was an actual field of study.
Yeah, I mean, just as there are MFAs in poetry, there are advanced programs for auctioneers, and I went to Worldwide College of Auctioneering in Mason City, Iowa. And when you're there, you learn the basics of the trade, of the profession. And then I chose to specialize in benefit auctioneering, which is specific, and trained with the National Auctioneers Association to become a benefit auctioneer specialist, and then also trained with Christie's and Sotheby's art auctioneers to learn the English style, because there's the American style, that's the fast talking, and then the English style, which is a little bit more about clear diction. And then also just, the school of live events where you're just talking to people and just joking around and gesticulating and trying to cajole them into donating money. So that's just kind of human nature. I joined Toastmasters because that's a great place to practice public speaking. Took improv comedy classes because that's a great way to think on your feet. And then you get into physical stuff too. Dance, acting, singing, whatever you can do to broaden your repertoire as a public speaker, performer, auctioneer person. To make that character more round.
So if anyone else had the same perception of auctioneering strictly being someone who can talk really fast, I think you just debunked that for all of it. There is so much more involved.
Yeah. Clarity is everything. Speed is nothing in that case. Yeah.
Oh, now I got one of my $1 million questions for you. How did you make the leap from auctioneering to poetry?
Well, it started with poetry. So the leap was, I think, about an economy of language. Both poets and auctioneers need to say the most in the least amount of words. You only have so much time when you're dealing with people drinking at a gala fundraising event. 500 people who are all very wealthy, all very affluent, don't need to listen to you speak very long until they decide not to listen. So poetry is an excellent tool for fundraising and auctioneering because it forces you to get to the point quickly.
Huh. Okay. So the poetry came before the auctioneering and then kind of progressed into this, then just really taking the poetry to the higher level.
I think the fact that I did study poetry and language and communication and everything that goes along with that, humanities, arts, you're constantly, as a poet, aware of the music of language, the music itself, fine arts, sculpture, opera, theater, poetry, permeates and pervades all the arts. It speaks the language. I mean, it's a universal language in a way. Poetry is. So when you look at that, when you look at, say, what can poetry touch that philanthropy also touches? Hearts. So the connection for me after a long time was that poetry is the language of feelings and on a deep level emotions. Philanthropy, which is for me my kind of auctioneering, is also on the level of empathy, pathos, helping others, identifying with others, putting yourself in other people's shoes. So a poet does a good job if he or she writes a poem that someone is able just to step into. And it may not be their world. It could be some very foreign world. But as a reader, if you can step into, say, Rumi, a mid-century poet who, you would think, oh, how am I going to relate to this man who lives in, Arabia or the Persian, peninsula hundreds and hundreds of years ago? And yet you can just step into a Rumi poem because it's there and it's simple. So I think that's the case for poetry and philanthropy being similar subjects, and how I can, as a poet, be an auctioneer for nonprofit organizations.
Got it. All right. So that ties those two together. Now I've got to kind of move into something that I know the audience doesn't. Where did your third part of your expertise, or that little third part of your history that you told me about behind the scenes, tie in with this?
Yeah. So for years before starting the company, where we have multiple auctioneers, an agency, if you will, and work as consultants and auctioneers for nonprofit organizations having events. Prior to that, I worked as a literary agent. As a poet, it's very difficult to market your work. At the same time, as an author, whether you're self-published or published, with a major, minor, or in between publisher, it's a challenge to market your work. And so after college, I was working at a bookstore, writing poetry, and found a job at a literary agency in the Hamptons. And there served over, I think it was about 100 to 150 authors, fiction, nonfiction, a lot of crime, mystery, thriller. No poets, well, some poets that had written novels. But I think it was through that experience, business-wise, managing an agency and working with so many personalities, that I was then later on able to start this company working in philanthropy, working as an auctioneer, where we work with equal number of nonprofit clients a year. The agency model is what I call it.
And how long did you do the literary agent gig?
I was a literary agent for 10 years, and now I've been an auctioneer consultant for about 12. Yeah.
What made you give up the literary agent work?
Well, it's dismal. You make no money. It takes so much effort to see a book come to life, and it's rewarding, in that sense. But the publishing world is always in demise. It's always shrinking. It's always aggregating itself and becoming more corporate. It's difficult for me to sustain a career in that atmosphere, in the absence of a best-selling author as a client. You need that to exist. I represented a lot of literary fiction, which wouldn't get large advances necessarily. Sometimes it could, but as dismal as it was gorgeous and wonderful, because you're reading stories, you're exposed to writers who are the most intelligent, refined, exciting people alive. So you get to work with amazing people, but the business is just so fraught.
So in a way, it almost sounds to me like your stint as a literary agent had an element of, or would appeal to, your philanthropic side.
Kind of, yeah. I thought to myself, at the time, I was a artist assistant as well for a painter and a sculptor. And as much as I loved working with them, I knew that I wasn't, whatever I learned about painting and sculpting, it wasn't going to be put back in the world. And I thought, where could I both learn and give? best and working with writers, you know, because I did learn about the business of writing and about crafting stories, editing manuscripts, putting together synopses, proposals, query letters, you know, that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I was able to, as a poet, able to generate some advice that was, I think, more valuable. So learning and not teaching, but giving at the same time was super valuable. And yeah, moving from an industry that didn't make a lot of money to the nonprofit world, you know, philanthropy. I think you have to be a bit of a philanthropist to be a literary agent.
You know, and that's actually something I've never heard before, is just how hard it is to make money as a literary agent. Because as a writer and someone who works with a lot of writers, both nonfiction and fiction, it's common knowledge that most writers make no money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're going to say, all right, I'm going to give me like 20 to 50 writers and let me try to make money with them, you can imagine the challenge.
Yeah, 100% of zero is zero, right?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. And then that was the experience. I worked at a large literary agency, or a boutique literary agency with some major clients, and then started my own agency in the city, and did that for a couple of years, and just quickly realized that as much as I liked it, I didn't love it enough to go down with the ship. Yeah.
Got it. That's very enlightening. So I'm going to jump back to something more, I don't want to say more interesting, but definitely more up your alley of what you're currently doing. I always like to know what's one of the best experiences or stories you have from your world in auctioneering. Like the most rewarding, fulfilling.
Yeah. I mean, every night's kind of a miracle because I witness hundreds of people, sometimes very spontaneously, decide to give money to a cause that they may have heard about or it may be new to them. So to be in the presence of the sort of philanthropic spirit, I describe it as I get to turn on this fountain of generosity, watch the water come up and splash around in it. That to me is a joy. It puts you at the forefront of human kindness. And that, you know, that is a great counteractive influence to maybe what you read in the news and what you think about how bad things are. People are always willing to help each other out. It's an absolute universal precept. You know, if you exist, it's easy to want others to be able to continue existing as well. And so there's a lot of breakthroughs in cancer, in human rights, in healthcare, in education, in the arts, you know, and that's just simply because people want to help people. And so for me, that's the kind of beauty of it, and the poetry of it all happens there.
Now, on that flip side of that, has there ever been a side of the auctioneering world where there was just like a terrible experience or something you could not believe happened?
Yeah, sometimes people are just like really loud and drunk and they don't care. And it's hard as a public speaker, you know, when you're kind of shunned or rejected by hundreds of people and you hear it, you know, you hear it immediately because people are just talking and it's difficult to get their attention. Yeah, there's been a few times where I've walked off stage and been like, I don't want to do this, you know, this is bad, you know, and you make a couple calls and you remember that 95% of the time it's awesome. Like any job, I'm sure people want to. I heard a woman recently talking about her work. I think she was an architect. She said, I've been working on this project for 20 years and sometimes I just feel like throwing it all in the garbage. You know, I think a lot of people, especially writers, can relate to that because you put so much into something and in hoping, you know, that it'll come to light one day. And it just, you know, at times you're like, I don't know, I could throw it all in the garbage, but you know, you get something to eat, you sleep a little bit, and you're okay the next day, and you're back at the desk.
You know, it's so funny you make that comparison because that's absolutely the way with writers. You could have 99 people read your book or your poetry or your screenplay and tell you it's the greatest thing they've ever read. And it's that one person who gives you the 1 star and they call it trash. And you're like, I'm done. Why am I doing this?
Yeah. Bob Smith from Kansas didn't like me on Amazon. I think I got to quit writing. Yeah.
Like, forget all the other people who love and support me. Bob's
Right.
gonna ruin my career.
Yep. That guy.
I also find it intriguing. I mean, maybe I shouldn't, because sometimes I think we put the affluent or the elite on this pedestal, right? Of, look what they've accomplished, look where they're at in life. But they could be just as rude as anybody else, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think so. I won't go too deep into that, but yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Lucas, this has been mind blowing. Like, just the things I'm learning. This is one of my favorite things about doing this show. So I appreciate your time. For everyone that's listening, we've got an audience of, people across the gamut, my clients, people we write for. Who are the best people that you're looking to meet? So if we have people listening right now who may be thinking they want to do an auction or that they could use some consulting, who are the best type of people that should reach out to you to find out more about how you can help enhance their organization?
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Matthew. If anyone listening or watching knows of a nonprofit organization that struggles to fundraise, that's someone that I could help. And we focus on event fundraising, people that have get their donors together, get their guests together, and we have an auction, or sometimes we just ask for donations. We do what we call mission-based fundraising, where we don't have any things we sell, but we present a short program. The organization presents a short program, and then we follow that with fundraising, so that so many people don't need anything or want anything, but they do want to make a difference. And that's what the mission-based fundraising does. So yeah, if anyone knows of any nonprofit organizations that need fundraising support, we consult with them and then host fundraising at events.
That is incredible. So for everyone listening, I know we took a slightly different approach to our show today, but I know for me, I've got a few things I'm going to implement in my own writing, and it's restored my faith in humanity, right? A lot of what we do here at Pen for Hire, unfortunately, we don't always charge what we should charge. Sometimes someone just has that story. They have that inspiration that needs to be out there in the world. And that's the way I like to give back. What I can't do financially, I can do with my God-given skills of help them tell that story. So for anyone listening, if you think you have a cause, or even if you're not sure, please reach out to Lucas, find out what they can do for you, how they can help your organization. And Lucas, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
I guess just email Lucas, Lucas, at huntauctioneers.com, Lucas at HUNT, auctioneers, AUCTIONEERS.com.
That is incredible. We'll make sure that's all in the show notes as well. As always, anyone listening, if you want, you could always reach out to me directly as well at the show, or at matt@penforhirenyc.com. You should know how to get me by now. We appreciate you all tuning in and spending this time with me and Lucas Hunt. It's been an absolutely amazing experience for me. I hope you feel the same. And Lucas, thank you again for being here on this humid, hot, and just miserable New York day.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Enjoy your beach time.
You too. Well, I don't think you're going to the beach, but thank you.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Thank you, Lucas.
All right. Take care, Matt. Bye.